you'll see that man appeared just 3 minutes before midnight. So imagine that it took man to appear on the earth. This is what the scientists say. We have a Vedic view, of course, but according to what the scientists say, if we clock the events, just 3 minutes before midnight today, man appeared. And the history, which was the recorded history which we have, whatever we know, the last 5,000 years or 10,000, so that is just about 2 seconds before midnight, because we don't have any record of the history which has happened before that. So isn't this concept so humbling to know that Earth has taken so many billions of years to form, for life to happen, for all the plants and animals to appear, and the mammals and human beings finally. It's such an humbling thought. But we see that in this very short period of time which man has taken, he has just appeared 2-3 minutes before midnight today. But he has actually made so many things, he has managed to mess up this earth in this very short period of time which is here. So sometimes we might think, why is this happening? Why has our earth degraded so much in the last few years or last few decades? So let's think about this for a few minutes. I'll show you a picture next. This is a model. You can see 2 models here in this picture. So this is, the first model shows you an ecosystem in which human has kept himself at the top of the ecosystem. It's a pyramidal, it's in a shape of a pyramid, where we can see all the different life, plants and animals are in a form of layers. There are lower animals in the bottom of the layer. And then man has put himself at the top of this ecosystem. And then we see the other picture. This is a picture of nature as it should be. It's in a cycle, it's in a circle. And all the various life forms are in this picture, they are arranged in a circular form. Nobody is at the top and nobody is at the bottom. They're all coexisting. And this is what the balance of nature is. If we leave nature to be on its own, this is how nature would be. But man, because of his ego, has put himself at the top of this ecosystem. And because he thinks he is the controller of the ecosystem, he has started doing so many actions which are detrimental to the health of the ecosystem. And that is why we see so many problems in the world today. So now let us briefly discuss about what are the problems in the world we are facing today. We have problems starting from terrorism to we have corruption, we have inflation. We have so many mental problems people have nowadays. We recently went through 2 years of COVID, and all of you can imagine what we have gone through. All of you know what we have gone through. And right as we are speaking today, there is a war raging in some part of our world. And in a war, nobody loses and nobody wins. It's the common man who's actually stressed and he is losing his property, he is losing life. So it is not a solution to anything. So there are so many problems in the world today, but today let's just restrict ourselves to the environment problems which we are facing. So how did this environmental problem start? Because we saw the earth is self-healing, self-regenerative. So where did all these problems start? So this problem started after the industrialization started about 200 years back. And then after industrialization started, people migrated to urban cities, and then there was a need to grow more food. And that's how industrial agriculture started. We all know about the Green Revolution, which happened after the Second World War, because there was less food, the scarcity of food. There was famine during the World War in different parts of the world, all created by man actually. We know in India also, Bengal, South India, we had famine during the world wars because so many things were being sent where the war was being fought. So we started doing agriculture in a way which was actually not good for the earth. It was very degrading. We started using chemicals, because we were told, scientists told the farmers to the government that use this pesticides, use this fungicides, use this fertilizers, and you will have bumper crop. So that's how the farmers were tricked into leaving their traditional methods of farming, and they started using all these chemicals for their farming. And these chemicals actually had their own consequences, which initially we didn't realize. But slowly, as decades went by, we started seeing all these consequences, like the soil and water started getting degraded and food started becoming toxic. We have heard of our great grandparents, parents who were very healthy till they were 85, 90. But today we see even 20, 25-year-old people, like they feel so lethargic. They feel less energy because food is actually the source of our energy. And we are degraded our soil so much that even the food which is coming out of it is actually toxic. So because farmers started using all these chemicals, these fertilizers and pesticides, what are these fertilizers and pesticides? They're finally salts. And as you know that when we drink something salty, we eat something salty, we need to drink a lot of water because that is how the salt works in your body. Similarly, when a farmer started using these fertilizers, the soil started becoming saturated with the salts. And then the farmer had to irrigate more. He had to irrigate more and he had to use more groundwater. And because of this, the soil further started becoming degrading because the water which was flowing out of the farms had become mixed with all these fertilizers, and also downstream, again, we started having problems where this water started accumulating. So we see so many problems associated with industrial agriculture or chemical agriculture, what we call. And then we see there were other problems which got associated because the soil became more saline, became more salty. It started cracking like this, and people had left their old traditional methods of farming where they used to grow for their family, many things, all their needs were met through their land. But now, because they wanted a commercial crop, they wanted a bumper crop, they started monocropping. And all this led to the soil being exposed to the sun. And then it became so infertile. And further down, we started seeing climate changes. Now, I think when I was in school, college, we used to hear about this climate change that is going to happen, the greenhouse effect, the acid rains, all this were there. But today it has become a reality. Today we see every year, we wait for the monsoon and we don't have any fixed date when the monsoon is going to start. It's become so unpredictable. Monsoons have become unpredictable. And we sometimes have very insufficient rains, and sometimes we have flash floods. Flash floods in the sense that the rain which should have maybe fallen in 15 days or 1 month suddenly comes down, pours down in 2 days. And then there is a situation which is like a flood-like situation. And when this happens, the topsoil, which is the most fertile soil, gets eroded, its erosion takes place. And tons of this topsoil, which is fertile, goes down with this flash flood, further degrading our soil. So it has become like a cycle. So Earth will survive without us. We have seen how in the history of the Earth, we were not there, but the Earth was there and it was regenerating. But will we survive Earth tomorrow if it's further degrading? Our next generation, what will we give to our next generation? So how do we get out of these problems? How do we find problems to these issues which we are facing? Is there a system or is there a method which will help us to think and resolve? So that brings us to the topic of today, which is permaculture. Now let's see what is permaculture and how can it help us to regenerate our planet. So this is the climate change which I told you about. This is all happening and we are all staying in the coastal area of Mumbai. So we will be the first people who will be affected if the water level rises, the sea level rises. So let's start talking about permaculture, and it starts with a story. So in the 1950s, 1960s, there was a person in Australia. His name was Bill Mollison. And he had worn many hats before he became a botanist and a forester. And he was a lecturer of botany in the Tasmanian University in Australia. So what is happening today in India started happening in Australia in the 1960s and 70s, because there are huge tracts of land in Australia. If you ever visited Australia, you will see that there are huge tracts of lands. And he saw that this industrial agriculture, which was being followed over there, was actually creating so much devastation over in the farm. So there are a lot of monocropping. Monocropping means the same kind of grains or whatever crop you're putting is for hundreds and hundreds of acres, the same kind of crop is being sold. And then to manage this kind of cropping system, they had to start using big machineries. They had to start using fertilizers, pesticides, what we have recently discussed. And he started seeing the same problem happening over there, the poisoning of the soil, the poisoning of water. The biodiversity was reducing. The biodiversity means different species of birds, insects, plants, animals. So all this was getting reduced because of this agricultural farming. And billions and tons of topsoil was getting eroded because of the use of all his machineries and tilling, which was happening every year. So because he was a forester, he started thinking about the forest system. But at the same time, he also, before he did that, he started protesting against the industrial agriculture with the government and the town planners over there. But his protest fell under, was unheard of. They didn't pay any heed to his complaints. So he started thinking, I want to do something about this, but what can I do? And he was very frustrated by the system over there. So he started thinking about the forest, where he used to go frequently because he was a wildlife enthusiast and he was a forester. And he started thinking, how is it that the forest is so very productive and abundant? It is so lush and green and beautiful. Who goes to the forest to till the land or plow the land over there? Who goes to the forest to sow a seed? And who irrigates the forest floor? There's nobody who does this. And still the forest is so abundant. And then he was thinking that the forest is actually performing so many ecosystem services. It irrigates. It actually infiltrates all the water which comes through during rains. It does a lot of nutrient recycling because nobody goes to the forest to fertilize it or put pesticides or spray pesticides. But still the forest is such a stable and diverse ecosystem. It is complex, but it is very stable and diverse. So he started thinking, how do we start making our agricultural system to mimic what is happening in the forest, as abundant and as lush like the forest? And he was joined in by another undergraduate student called David Holmgren in the 1970s. Now, David Holmgren was an environmental designer, and he had a lot of big thinking ideas. And both of them put their heads together and they collaborated together and they started studying the various systems which were there of good practices. More than 100 years back, whatever was being practiced by indigenous people in Australia and in other countries. And they started studying a lot of literature of people who had done good work in the field of agriculture. So some of them were natural farmers, like you must have heard of the Japanese farmer called Fukuoka. So they studied his system. Then there was another person called, his name was Russell Smith, who had written a lot of books. He had written a book on tree farming, how you should grow perennial crops if you want to be sustainable and regenerative. Plus, there were other people whom they studied, like P.A. Yeomans from Australia. He was a person who did a lot of work, hands-on work in rainwater harvesting. So all this indigenous knowledge which they imbibed and all these different systems which they studied, they went deep into this research, and they came up with a book known as Permaculture 1. In 1978, this book came out, and that is how the word permaculture was coined. So now let us discuss a little more about what is this about, permaculture. So the need, why permaculture? First of all, we have to discuss the need. What was the need for forming this new system of permaculture? Because as I told you, many people had worked, but they were all in different sections and different body of knowledge, but there was no integration. So Bill Mollison actually started this whole system of permaculture where he integrated all the good practices, be it of regenerating soil, be it of water harvesting or growing crops or so many other things. He integrated all this body of knowledge into one system known as permaculture, because we were going from a pattern of decline and we wanted to go to a pattern of regeneration. We have discussed how the pattern of decline is, degrading our farming system. And he was in search of a system pattern which would be a pattern of regeneration. Then what he learned from the forest when he was in the forest, actually he had retreated to the forest for almost 2 years and he stayed in the forest to study all the systems that was happening over there. So he saw that if we work with nature, nature has its own logic of working. And if we work with nature, we would also become very abundant like the nature. But if we work against nature, like what the industrial farming is doing or what the chemical farming is doing, we're actually going against the logic of nature. So if you work against nature, then it would be a pattern of decline. Then he worked about the ecological design, which we can derive from nature's wisdom. So like the nature's logic, nature has its own wisdom, and that is how it is sustainable, and without any human interventions, the forest grows. So if we study this ecological design and we imbibe it in our work, then if we use this nature's wisdom, then we will also have an abundant system like the forest. So that is how this knowledge from the forest can help us to create something known as a cultivated ecology, because ecology is coming from nature and we are mimicking that into what we want to grow. So that is known as a cultivated ecology, means we work like nature, but we plant what we want to plant, which will be helpful to us and which will be beneficial to the ecosystem. So we bring that ecology from the nature into our growing spaces. So that is what is cultivated ecology is. And he also brought in the approach of whole systems thinking. Whole systems thinking is thinking about a bigger picture, not thinking about the parts, but thinking about the whole. Because when we think about the whole, we create relationships between the parts, and then the whole is greater than sum of the parts. So that is what will actually make our systems abundant. So this is what his thought process was when he started permaculture. So now let's go a little more further in this journey of permaculture. Now let's first try to understand what is permaculture. What does this word mean? Because I hear many people, when they hear this word, when I say I'm a permaculturist or I've been studying permaculture for the last so many years. So the first question usually which comes is, what is this word? I've never heard this word permaculture. So let's try to understand, what does this word permaculture mean? The word permaculture comes from the combination of two words, permanent and agriculture. So going back to what Bill Mollison wanted, he wanted a sustainable farming system. He wanted a farming system which would be permanent, which you don't go back every year and till the soil and you fertilize it again and again and you do this and that. So he wanted a system which is permanent. So that's why the part of the word perma comes from the word permanent. And he added agriculture because that is what he wanted to do. He wanted a permanent agriculture. But slowly, as he started working between different communities, he traveled a lot all over the world to teach permaculture. So he started studying from various communities, and he realized that agriculture is a very limited field. But when we talk about culture, culture encompasses a lot of belief systems which is there in society, the customs, the practices, and the social behavior of different communities. So he realized that culture is a very broader field, and without culture we cannot have agriculture, because culture comes first and then we do agriculture. So he dropped the word agri from the agriculture and he joined them together to form the word permanent culture, which is permaculture, abbreviated to shortened to permaculture. Now, there are lots of definitions of permaculture, but I'll just take one definition and I'll try to understand what exactly is permaculture. So I'll just read this out. Permaculture is an agricultural system or method that seeks to work with nature and not against it through thoughtful planning, careful use of resources, and a respectful approach to life, so as to create highly efficient, self-sustaining ecosystems. Now let's talk about few of these words. Obviously, agricultural system, because when Bill Mollison started permaculture, Bill Mollison and David Holmgren started permaculture, it was basically to have a permanent agricultural system and work with nature, because we have understood by now that what happens if we work against nature. And then there is thoughtful planning, because we don't just go and start sowing something and doing something on the field, there has to be thoughtful planning. You have to think about so many things which will gradually come to what we have to think, how we have to think. And then there is careful use of resources. Why careful use of resources? Because if we need to be sustainable, if we need to be regenerating, then we have to carefully use the resources which are there within your reach. If you start buying fertilizers, if you start buying pesticides, herbicides, so many things from outside, nowadays even seeds, our forefathers used to never buy seeds, never buy fertilizers. They used to create this in their own farm. But today we see today's farmer is actually dependent on outside, multinational companies for his seeds, his fertilizers, his pesticides, everything. That is why it is a decline pattern. Today's farming is a decline pattern. So careful use of resources and a respectful approach to life, because when you do chemical farming or you do industrial agriculture, you're killing so many microbes which are there in the soil. So many species, diverse species of plants and animals get eliminated. So many birds, insects, beneficial insects, butterflies, all of them have they're not part of that ecosystem anymore now. So when we want to do a permanent agriculture, then we have to be respectful about all the life forms which are there. And when we do all these things, we'll obviously have a very highly efficient and very self-sustaining ecosystem. So this is what, in short, is the definition of permaculture. But let's now go ahead and learn more about this. So now, if we compare permaculture to be a tree, I've shown here a picture of a tree, and so beautiful it looks, right? So we see that the tree has deep-rooted roots. And what is the function of these roots? These roots go deep into the earth and it absorbs all the nutrients and moisture which is there in the soil. So this is what I would like to say, compare the permaculture tree to the disciplines. The permaculture, the knowledge of permaculture has come from different disciplines of knowledge, like botany, biology, agriculture, horticulture, geography, architecture, anthropology, economics, finances, and energy systems. Now, you will be very bewildered that what are so many different diverse subjects doing here. But actually, if you see, they're all very integrated. You cannot just work on one. If you work on one without working on the others, without understanding the others, your design will be incomplete. In fact, I have met so many people when I was in my permaculture journey, so many people who have been in this journey with me. So sometimes when we discuss, they say that right from childhood, I was very interested to learn ecology, or I used to like geography, but I didn't like the way it was taught in school, the geography textbooks. Or I always wanted to learn landscape architecture, but I had to become an architecture for that. But I am not an architecture, I am a software engineer. So I never could go and, even as a hobby, learn that. But when we all came to permaculture, we all had very similar experiences. All these topics or subjects which we wanted to learn, which we were interested in, were all integrated into this study of permaculture. And some of them said that we never knew that there is such a knowledge which has all these things, all this knowledge integrated together. So that is the root of the permaculture tree. It harvests the knowledge from so many different disciplines. Then when we look at this tree again, we see this robust trunk, the solid trunk which is there, which is actually supporting the whole tree, this whole huge canopy which is there on the tree, and even the roots, it is supporting that. So this trunk of this permaculture tree is actually the ethics and the principles of permaculture, which we will shortly discuss. And then coming to this beautiful canopy of permaculture, which is laden with beautiful fruits and leaves and branches. So this whole canopy is actually in the permaculture tree are the various applications of permaculture. So Bill Mollison started this as an agricultural system, but we'll see where all this permaculture knowledge can be applied. It can be applied on your farms, in your gardens, in your various plantations, even at home, on your terrace, in your windowsill. There's something known as aquaculture where you can apply this knowledge. And further, as Bill Mollison started teaching and traveling the world, he started integrating so many different things, and the scope of permaculture started expanding. And the design of permaculture started being applied to designing eco-villages and urban designs. Even you don't have to have a farm. You can be in an urban city and still use this ethics and principles and design methodology of permaculture where you're staying. And as the scope of permaculture expanded, after Bill Mollison, his first generation students, second generation students started taking this further, and they started applying this basic concepts of permaculture to other areas. We call them invisible structures, like setting up a business. When you're doing the business design, you can use this design principles and the ethics and methodologies, design methodologies to designing a business. You can design corporations. You can design actually even your portfolio or your finances using these principles. So the scope of permaculture is very wide and large and can be used in many scenarios. So let's go a little further now into this journey. So we mentioned about, I've been talking about this ethics of permaculture and design principles, design methods. So let's try to understand what that is. So I would like to show a very beautiful quote here. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. This is such a heavy statement, actually. If we think about this, it's such a, mind-boggling realization when we think about it, because we cannot simply think of our survival. Humans today are actually thinking of only their survival. Actually, I don't think we think even 1 year down the line. We are so much concentrating all our energies, our thoughts in just today. But we can't do that. We have to, every generation has to think about and take responsibility to ensure the survival. We say about the seventh generation. In many customs and many cultures of the world, they talk about the seventh generation, 7 generations. Even in India, we say Sat Janam. So it is about taking responsibility for so many generations ahead of us. It is about conserving seeds, because the seed bank is what we have, those genetics. If we don't hold on to them, we'll lose them. We have lost so many of our seeds in the last few decades, I would say. We had hundreds and lakhs of rice seeds, varieties of lakhs, and today we have hardly a few hundreds. So with time, even this will go on deteriorating, because we are all using hybrid seeds now. So it is about conserving the seed. It is about water, taking care of our water, clean water. We all need clean drinking water. It is about life. It is about looking ahead. It is about taking responsibility for our future generations. So this is where the permaculture ethics comes from. So we see here ethics. So I'll discuss shortly about this ethics. And then we have design principles and design methods. I'll discuss about this immediately now. So let's start with the ethics. So permaculture ethics and design principles. In this diagram, you'll see for some time now, let's not think about the outer circle. Let's just concentrate on the inner circle. Now we see there are 3 ethics of permaculture which are written over here. So the first ethic is known as earth care. We have this in the green circle, that is known as earth care. So this ethics, these 3 ethics which we have in permaculture is actually what differentiates permaculture from any other agricultural systems. We'll see how. So earth care is about taking care of the earth. We have already discussed this, taking care of the soil, what happens if we don't take care of the soil, the air, the water, basically taking care of the environment. And it is about putting nature above us. Like we discussed about the 2 models, the triangular model and the circular model. Man has put himself at the apex of the triangular model, but it is putting nature above us. So earth care is about all the small and big activities which we do to take care of the earth. Then we come to people care. The second ethic is people care. So I just forgot to mention earth care. Like we see so many farmers today are having bore wells, in their farms. So actually the groundwater, the aquifers have depleted to such a bad level that nowadays people have to drill almost like 900 feet, 1,000 feet before they strike water through their bore wells. And people are happily harvesting so much water from these bore wells. And earlier there used to be just 1 bore well in a village or 2 bore wells in a village. But we see today that one small village can have about hundreds of bore wells, and we are all happily removing water. But does anybody replenish this water? Do we recharge these aquifers? We don't do that. So that is how we are degrading the earth. And also, do we take any interventions for soil erosion? We saw during floods, so much of soil is going on. Do we do any interventions to do that? So all these are actions where we are not doing anything. So that is degrading the earth. When we come to people care is about taking care of the people. So this is the ethic where community comes in play. And in permaculture, people care is very central to all of our activities, because only when we take care of people will they take care of the earth, and they take care of so many, the next generation and all. So people are very important in permaculture. And this ethic of people care is where the community comes in and plays a huge role and living out the fullness of permaculture. So we have to be very conscious of how we take care of people. Starting from small things, if you have a land, if you have some people working on a land, are you giving them the right wage, giving them a just wage? Or are you sharing your abundance with them? It can be your neighbors. How do you interact with your neighbors? How do you interact with your people around you? So all these small and big acts put together is people care. It can be about if you are a farmer, if you are a market gardener, are you growing food which is nutritious, which is poison free? Are you selling it to the people who will gain from eating that food? So even this is people care, because if you're growing poison food and selling it to the people, then you are selling poison to those people. You're poisoning them, slow poisoning, maybe fast poisoning also, because we are seeing today so many diseases, cancer, and so many neurological diseases, and so many, people are suffering from. Where is this coming from? It's coming from our food, from our water. So people care is very important. And the last ethic is fair share. Fair share talks about reinvestment of surplus. whatever surplus we have, whether it is food or money or whatever resources we have, do we reinvest it? It is about limiting our consumption, because we know that we have become consumers today. We want to buy everything, whatever money can buy, and we want to earn more money so that we can buy more. So we have become consumers. But if we want to be sustainable, if we want to decrease our personal footprints on the earth, carbon footprints on the earth, then we have to limit our consumption. And it is about reinforcing a regenerative culture. Our attitude, the way we think has to change. So all this comes in fair share. It's actually a very wide field where a lot of things are discussed. But I would like to give a very small example how we can in our daily life apply this earth ethics, this ethics of permaculture. Suppose I go and buy a fruit for my family, or I grow a fruit in my farm and I bring it home, and it's a papaya I have brought, and I cut this fruit, I skin it, and I distribute this very juicy and tasty papaya to my family, my neighbors, my friends. So what am I doing by doing this? I'm taking care of the people care, because I'm giving them something very nutritious that will make them healthy. And what do I do with the scraps, the papaya skin which I have removed? I can throw it in my dustbin, and which will eventually go to the landfill. And downstream, it will cause many more problems. Instead, what I can do is I can use this scraps, my kitchen's waste, and use it for composting. And when it composts, I can add it to my soil and regenerate my soil, giving back to the earth. And what do I do with the seeds? Do I also throw that in the trash? No, I can save those seeds, and I can make a nursery out of them, and I can grow papaya saplings. I can distribute it to my neighbors, my friends. I can grow some on my own and get a next generation of papayas. So this is how we can, with a small action of eating a fruit, we can take care of the earth, we can take care of the people, and we can take care of the next generation fair share. So it is as simple as that. We can do this in our everyday life. Now, I hope this ethics of permaculture is clear. So now let us look at the outside circle. You can see the outside circle, there are 12 principles of permaculture. And these principles of permaculture have actually been inspired from nature's ecology, how the nature works. So Bill Mollison and David, when they went and studied nature from ecology, they accepted all this knowledge and they put it in the form of principles. And these principles are very universal. They can be applied anywhere. In fact, they can be applied even in your day-to-day life, which we will discuss later. And these principles form the framework for design. And we'll we'll quickly go through these principles and see what we can learn. Actually, I'm not going in depth because we have to cover a lot, and we will try to understand how much ever we can about permaculture too. So I'll quickly go through this principle. So first principle here is observe and interact. So observe and interact means take time to engage with nature. Today, in our very busy schedule, we hardly interact with nature. We hardly observe what is happening in nature. Earlier, we used to, when we didn't have in our childhood, we didn't have so much of TV time or screen time. We used to just sit on a window and look at nature. It used to be a very nice pastime for me and my brother, sister. We all used to spend a lot of time. But today's children or even adults, I would say, we hardly spend any time to observe nature, because nature has many lessons to deliver. We can see how with time, with seasons, how even a small tree, how it changes its features, how it looks. So take time to engage with nature. During rainy season, if you have a farm or if you go to your hometown, or even if you are in a city, see how the water flows. Where does it flow? What happens to the sunlight during the day? Where does it come from? What happens during the mid sun, noon? So how does it alter the shadows? So observe all the small things in nature, and actually you start learning so much. So observe, and then you interact. When you observe, you can start interacting. You can start using that knowledge. Then second principle is catch and store energy. We all have heard this saying since childhood, make hay while the sun shines. So catch and store energy is exactly that. It is about developing systems to collect resources when they are at peak abundance and use them when you really need them. Like we see during the rainy season, there's abundant rain. If you are in Maharashtra, you're in the Western Ghats, so much rain falls that, like it's crazy. You can't step out of the house. But what happens to all that rainwater? It just flow out. If you're in a city, it's to the storm water drain, it flows to the river and to the sea. And then what happens? Nothing remains on the earth, or nothing remains in the soil. Everything gets drained out. And though we have the highest rainfall in this region, but we face drought-like situations later because we have never conserved that water. So catch and store energy. How can we use the sunlight which is falling on free energy, very high intensity energy, which is falling every day for 7 to 8 hours a day, and we are like not using it. So installing solar panels, installing solar cookers, that is how we can use. We use pickles, we make papads and all, because we have abundance of some fruits during some seasons. So we store that in the form of pickles and other things. So the next principle is obtain a yield. So obtain a yield is about emphasizing some projects which we do that will generate meaningful rewards. Because we cannot do anything which we don't get something back, because that is how the human brain is wired, so we want something back. So obtain a yield. So even when you're farming, if you have some time to get a certain crop, then what can I do in a small time to get something out of it? So obtain a yield. Then the next principle is apply self-regulation and accept feedback. So this principle actually forces us to think about what can I do to self-regulate my use of resources, and getting appropriate feedback and applying those feedback. The next principle is use and value renewable resources and services. So this principle talks about making best use of nature's abundance and reducing the consumption and dependence of non-renewable resources. We all have studied about renewable and non-renewable resources in our textbooks. So how can we use more of renewable resources? In many ways we can do that. Next principle is produce no waste. Waste nothing. Always use it, employ value waste and employ it for getting some new resources like the compost, which I talked to about. The waste which would have gone to the landfill, I have created compost out of it. So never use, upcycle it. Creatively think how you can upcycle something, how you can recycle something. The next principle is design from, the next one is design from patterns to details. So in nature, we see there are a lot of patterns. When you go out in communities, you will see patterns. We see patterns in nature, which is in different forms, in time, and in behaviors. So how can we use these patterns which we learn from nature and communities and put it into our design, and then do the detailing work? Next principle is integrate rather than segregate. So when we work in segregation, when we segregate things, then it becomes very unsustainable. But rather, if you can integrate things, then the whole system becomes very sustainable. I'll explain this later in one of our discussions. So use small and slow solutions. We see that when we do something in a very small way initially, and then we get confidence, we can always scale it up. Because doing this a small and slow solution actually makes the system easier to manage. And if you have made some mistakes, it's very easy to rectify it, less expensive to rectify it, and then you can always scale it up. The 10th principle is use and value diversity. So we all know that a diverse system is more resilient. It is not vulnerable to threats, outside threats. So make your systems more diverse and use edges and value the marginals. Now this principle tells you about the edge. What is an edge? Now, edge is an interface between two biomes or two mediums. And you see that wherever two edges meet, that edge is a very diverse, productive, and energy efficient system. Actually, it is. We can see this everywhere. We can see that when two communities, have an interface, two states, the border towns and cities between two states, they're so rich in their culture because they have culture from both the states, food habits, languages, clothings, and all. So this is what edge is. And if you want to talk about a land system, and if you're creating, you will see here, there's a picture of a pond. I want to make a pond. If I make a circular pond, I have a certain area and a certain circumference. But if I decide to make this pond into a pond which has irregular finger-like projections, so within the same area, I am doubling the circumference and I'm introducing so many edges. And these edges eventually will become habitat for diverse species of plants and animals, because they all like to go and hide in those nooks and crannies, whereas circle doesn't allow that. So this is how we can create more edges. And the last principle is about creatively use and respond to change. So this is about how we can creatively create a positive impact out of an inevitable change. We all went through 2 years of COVID. It just came so suddenly, but we all slowly and steadily, creatively adjusted to this sudden change which happened. So creatively respond to changes. So I hope I have given you a small overview of the principles and ethics of permaculture. So let's go a little ahead now. So now we are finished with the ethics, that is, and the permaculture principles. So now let's come to design methods, which I have been mentioning many times. So that is, design methods are actually tools for designing any system by using the ethics and the principles and the various tools, strategies. So design methods, we have many design methods in permaculture which we can use. I'll discuss 3 design methods here today. So first is known as needs and yields analysis. So needs and yields analysis talks about the needs and yields of any element, or a system. Now here I've taken a element, we can see a picture of a chicken here. So this is my element for discussion now, but it can be a non-living thing, or it can be a living creature. It can be anything. So whenever you take any element, be it living or non-living, you think first about what are its needs. Now, example, for a living thing, it can be food, it can be water, it is sunlight, it can be shelter. So different needs it has. And also it has yields. For example, here the chicken it gives many yields. It gives eggs, it gives meat, feathers, whatever. If you are a person who are using this, these are the yields. It gives even birth to many other chickens also. And then we see here functions. So these functions are coming from the characteristics of the chicken. If you see the chicken, if you observe the chicken, is always scratching, continuously scratching, because it's looking for its food in the soil. It is looking for grains. It is looking for worms in the soil. But how can we utilize this nature of the chicken, scratching? Actually, we can utilize this by using it where we want to make a garden bed. So when we want to make a garden bed, we want to actually take out all the weeds and all the seeds which will further give rise to weeds. So chicken will happily go and eat all these seeds. And if there are some harmful worms and all, it will eat all this. So that is how we can use this characteristic of the chicken. Then we can use the nature of foraging for insects into garden pest management. Wherever you need pest management in a garden bed, you can let loose the chickens, it will do that work. And you know that the chicken manures, whenever it is eating and moving around, it poops around, and that poop fertilizes the soil. So this is how we can think about the needs and the yields and the functions or characteristics of a particular element, and not just stop at one element. Think of all the different elements which will be there in the system, and try to integrate the output of one system connected to the input of other system. Because when you integrate these systems, then we create a system where these the byproducts of one element will go as the input of the other element. So what will happen when we do this? The whole system gets connected, and then there are relationships between the systems, which will make it very resilient. And also no waste will be created, because waste of one system goes as resources of another system. So this is how a whole system design thinking works. And this will even make the moving of materials very easy and sensible within the system. allowing energy to flow along the paths of least resistance. So this was needs and yields analysis. This is one design method. Let's go to the second design method. This is known as sector analysis. When you talk about designing a land, we see here the different directions. And we see that there are so many wild energies which are entering a system, a land system. So they can be the sun energy, which is entering during different seasons. We see that the sun is covering a different path. So during winter, it has a restricted path. During summer, it has a broader path, as we see it here in this picture. Then there are prevailing winds. Winds are coming in different, from different direction, different seasons. There are so many other energies which are entering the system. If there is an industry somewhere nearby, we have air pollution, polluted air coming from some system. If we have a forest somewhere, then we might have wildlife coming from somewhere. We also have some good energies, if there is a mountain view here. So we would like to have that mountain view. So sector analysis is about designing how we want to design our farm, which energies do we welcome and which energies do we block. The energies which we don't want, how do we deflect them? So it's all about working with the energies, the free energy which is entering our system. So this was sector analysis. And the third design method is zone analysis. So we see in this picture is a very simple picture. It need not be like this. Depending on your land, it need not be concentric. It can be of any shape. But for discussion sake, we'll take a concentric system here. So in the middle of this picture, we see a home, which is zone 0. So zone analysis is all about dividing your land into different zones and making these zones according to energy efficiency. Now, how much energy are you expending on different elements? So that is how you go on placing them. How much maintenance does it need? How much of energy do you have to go? How many frequently do you have to visit these elements? So accordingly, you place them away from your home or near to your home. So this is about zoning. This can be used actually in our day-to-day life, in our homes, in designing our workspace, in designing our home, or even in your town planning, or it has many applications. So this was about design methods. So all these design methods, design principles, these are all tools which will help us to design our land later. So now I have discussed a little about the design thinking which goes in permaculture. Now let us think about how permaculture is used to make a land design regenerative. Okay, so the purpose of permaculture, as we have discussed, is about creating living environments that are harmonious, sustainable, and productive. At the same time, we want the systems to reduce our work and energy, which is required to maintain them. So let's see how we can do all this to make a land design regenerative. So we need to work with soil. As we saw, our soil are degraded. So many people who buy land, they say that hardly we have any topsoil, So how to create topsoil in less time? If we leave it to the nature, it will take 500 years to make 1 inch of topsoil. But how do we accelerate this process? So there are many techniques, there are many strategies to do that. It can be through use of compost, or it can be cover cropping, or it can be green manuring, or through crop rotation. So there are many things which we can do to make our soil, regenerate our soil. Then it can be about rainwater harvesting. I discussed today how we don't replenish the aquifers. So what can we do to replenish our aquifers? We see here a picture of a house. This house can be in a urban setup, or it can be a rural house, because nowadays we know urban town planning has made it mandatory to have green construction. So everybody has to make recharge the groundwater or a borewell. Otherwise, you have to pay tax to the government. That is how the government is designing it, so that people think about nature. Otherwise, we don't think about all this if we are not pressed financially. So how do we use this rainwater which is following from the roof? We can use that to fill rainwater tanks underground the house, or even above the ground. Or we plant more trees, because we all know that trees are actually storing water under the roots. Huge amount of water can be stored by one tree. So the more trees you plant, the more water harvesting you can do. And did you know what is the cheapest and the most easiest way of storing water? That is actually the soil. It is the cheapest way of, you buy rainwater tanks and all. You have to put in so much money to buy a tank and maintain it. But the easiest way to store water is the soil. But to do that, you have to make some interventions. You have to make some trenches. You have to, have more biomass in the soil. Only then will the soil absorb into the water absorb into the soil. So rainwater harvesting to build in our aquifers. Functional plantations. How do we plant? Once we have decided we are going to do a land design, how do we plant? So we see that there are mutual beneficial species which we can plant, and each species has its own diverse set of services that it gives, and it works in harmony with each other. So how do we plant? We do monocropping, only one type of fruit tree or one type of crop everywhere, or do we do functional planting, plants which help each other to in pest control? There are some plants which help in pest control, some plants which fertilize the soil by fixing nitrogen. There are plants which can attract beneficial insects. So how do we all integrate this together to make a symbiotic relationship between all these species to create a healthier ecosystem, which will also be useful resources for humans, beneficial to man as well. Then we talk about animal integration. We have discussed just now how the chicken has its own characteristics. So each animal has its own characteristics. And we integrate animals into the landscape. Then they do a lot of services, which otherwise you have to do, you will have to put in that much labor. So there's a very famous saying in permaculture, which Bill Mollison used to say. He says, you don't have a slug problem. You have a deficiency of duck. So usually we see that, people complain about slugs in their snails. Slugs are like snails in the farm. And then they start spraying things to kill them. But if you just introduce some ducks, in a small pond, ducks don't need a very big pond, just a small body of water. And they'll go all around and they will eat the snails. They will not destruct your vegetables or anything, but they'll eat all the snails. So how can you integrate different animals in your system? So then we talk about using passive energy. What is passive energy? Passive energy meaning how can we use energy which is around us for our benefit, without depending on a grid, without depending on the electricity which is coming from our municipal grid. So we can do this in different ways. If you're staying in a warm climate, then how do you build your house? How do you have your roof overhang so that it blocks the summer sun and it allows the winter sun to come into your house to warm your house? What kind of material will you use to insulate your house? How will you take care of the thermal radiation? Or what kind of trees will you plant around your building, which will, block the harsh sun from a particular direction, but allow the very early morning sun from the east? So these are all things which we can think of to use passive energy. So then we can, permaculture also discusses about using appropriate technology. So permaculture is not against using technology, but we have to use the appropriate technology. The technology which will take less but give us more. And these are all DIY things also which you can make on yourself. Here I put a picture of a bicycle which is connected to a flour mill. You can make your own solar cooker, or you can make so many things, a cob oven, or so many different technologies you can make which will actually help you and make your life easier. So these are all the things which we can do to make our land design regenerative. So let's move a little further here now and see that all this knowledge of permaculture, where is it applied? Where can we apply? Which are the different systems? We have talked about land systems, but where all can this be applied? So we can use it for our personal footprints. It's not necessary that only a person who has land has to learn permaculture. People come to permaculture. Many people come because today people are becoming very aware of the environmental degradation. So they want to know, how can I contribute? What can I do in my daily life or in my lifestyle to decrease my carbon footprints? So this is your personal footprints, but how will I reduce the burden on earth? You can do your water audit to see how much water I'm consuming. Can I reduce my consumption of water? Can I reduce my consumption? So this kind of thinking. So we do have personal footprints in permaculture. Then you can use permaculture to design regenerative landscapes. I just discussed this topic, how we can do so many different things to make it regenerative. Then designing energy efficient homes and settlements. This also I discussed in short, but basically we can actually design whole eco villages and settlements and apartments to be energy efficient. Then permaculture can be applied to social, there's a part of permaculture which is known as social permaculture, which is applied to communities. How can we build our communities? How we do integrate our communities? How can we work with the people? Because we have discussed about people care is very central to permaculture. So working with communities is a big part of permaculture. Then we spoke about land design, but there is something in permaculture which we called as invisible structures. Invisible structures are structures which we don't see, but we work with them every day. So how can we use this design thinking, this whole system thinking into designing these invisible structures, which are like designing, if you have a business, how will you use these principles to design a business, how to create a template where you can make out, how your business will flow, how the energy will flow through your business, and how will you do different things. You can design policies and so many different things you can apply. This is the second generation of permaculture, second and third generation who have gone ahead and widened the scope of permaculture into invisible structures. So these are the various applications of permaculture. Now I will talk about the personal benefits of learning permaculture, which will resonate maybe with some of you, or personally I'm talking about this. What are the different benefits of learning permaculture? So it trains you in whole system designs, and design thinking, what I discussed with you about system thinking and design thinking. So slowly, as you start applying this in your daily life or in different designs of land and all, it becomes a part of your your makeup. And we can start designing systems which are abundant, because these principles have actually come from a place of abundance from nature. So these same principles, if you start applying in your daily life, in your businesses, in your land, in your home, we will see abundance. Then personally, we can see that permaculture design is actually very intensive in information and design. We used to see that the traditional modes of farming was very labor intensive. We used to have a lot of people working labor in the hot summer and all. It was very labor intensive. And the industrial agriculture, as we discussed, was very energy intensive. But permaculture designs are very information and design intensive, because before doing anything on the land, we first create a design on paper. And then we start like all the methods which I discussed, design methods, needs and yields analysis, sector analysis. Then there is zone planning, and there are so many other methods also. We use all this to first design the land before we start implementation. In the meantime, you can always do small solutions. It's not that you take 1 year to design, so 1 year your land is lying vacant. You can always keep doing something over there which is not permanent till you come up with a permanent design. And this design which you see here is a design which I made myself for my small plot of land, which right now I am implementing. But in the meantime, I used it for 2-3 years to grow something, bring some things back home. And now slowly I'm implementing this. So the design is very central to permaculture. Then these principles and ethics and design methodologies can help you in your day-to-day life. It has wide applications in your day-to-day life. Like I said, zoning can be used for designing your workspace, your home space, your city space, how you want to use the transport, whether you want to use zone 1, which transport you want to use, zone 3, whether you will use a car. So many things goes into it. And you can obviously use it for land designing. And as I spoke, you can use it for designing invisible structures. So wide applications. Then these permaculture actually helps you to connect with earth and connect with nature and connect with others, because we slowly start implementing this people care, earth care principles, ethics and all. So many people who have come to permaculture actually are actually not from any growing background. They don't have a farm, but somehow they've heard about permaculture, that it is design thinking. We want to learn about design. So they've all come, and then it has helped them to connect with nature, and it will help them to heal, because all of us know that earth is a very healing, it's a play, it's a great capacity to heal. So there's a saying, all the problems of the world can be solved in a garden. So many people, they find that when they do gardening, a lot of their problems, which mental problems they have, or they just forget them and they become very wholesome. So connecting with nature, connecting with the earth helps us to overcome so many of our issues. Then it can help you to have a new hobby. If you're a person who likes gardening or something, then obviously this directly extends itself to your hobby. Or you can even have a career. If you're thinking of having a new career and you think that these are what will help me to have this career, you can always think of studying permaculture. And it also gives you creative satisfaction, because designing is an integral part of permaculture. So like you see this design I've made. So there are many people who like to do graphical designs or hand renderings. So there are always some drawing or the other going in. So you can always use your creative juices, even design thinking, think how different things can connect. So all this will give you a creative satisfaction. That is how personally benefits of learning permaculture. So now let's come to, I'm almost coming to the end of my presentation now. So permaculture for whom? Who can learn permaculture? Actually, there is no age barriers for learning permaculture. So in the West and even in some schools in India, this permaculture curriculum is being introduced in schools. Because in school, we have all these topics, in biology, geography, everything is segregated in different things. But when you start learning permaculture, you will have hands-on experiences of bringing all this knowledge together, because you study climate, you study so many things. So there is no age barrier. And what is the prerequisite on education, experience, background? There's no prerequisite. Any skill is welcome, because we see that in permaculture, people coming from different background, bring different experiences, different skills, and they just add on, they learn permaculture and they add on and enhance their skills, and they give new insights and new outlook to this field. That's how the scope of permaculture is expanding, because people are bringing their own knowledge from their own fields and applying it to permaculture. That's how permaculture is growing. Then people from all walks of life, people coming from different walks of life can come to permaculture. They're landscape designers, they're gardeners, environmentalists who want to learn more about permaculture, because permaculture is coming from nature's wisdom, whereas these other fields somehow are very restricted. So people want to know how I can grow in my particular field by learning permaculture. Professionals. Then there are land custodians and non-land custodians. I told you about how land can, if you have a land which is sitting idle, how permaculture will help you to start designing that land and making it abundant. And if you don't have land, how can you use these principles in your daily life, in your workspace? And then people looking for a career or hobby can upgrade their skills, have new career or this thing. So permaculture is for everybody, for people coming from diverse backgrounds. Now, how permaculture education is shared, I will just end with this slide. So, as you know, I have discussed how permaculture knowledge started in the 1970s, and Bill Mollison created an education system, but he didn't, he decentralized, he kept it decentralized because he didn't want it to be, utilized by in a wrong way. So it is very open to everybody. It is a very decentralized system. So there are different ways of learning permaculture. You can start with an introductory course like what we are doing today, which can be 1 hour, 2 hours long. So where you will just get the flavor of permaculture, what is permaculture, what are the different aspects of permaculture. So that is an introduction course. Then you can have foundation courses. which can be about 20 hours. And these 20 hours are very flexible. It can be spread over a week, Monday to Sunday or something like that, 2-3 hours every day, or it can be spread over 3-4 weekends, So let's just see what are the topics which are covered in permaculture. There's 20 weeks also. What are the topics which are basically topics, basic permaculture basics will be are covered, like in ecology, ethics, principles, methods of design. Today I just introduced these topics, but we go deeper into this topic and see how these topics can be methods and designs. We learn more about them. Then we learn about cultivated ecology, about how we work with water, how we work with climates, how we work with soils and plants and create microclimates. Then we talk about designing productive ecosystems and landscape, how we can use the nature's wisdom to create food gardens, food forests, animal integrations, and even do restoration work in a degraded landscape. So this is one part of permaculture study. Then increasing resilience, sustainability, and productivity. So doing analysis and problem solving and disaster management, because in permaculture, we always think of extremes in climate and we design for the extremes, and that itself takes care of disaster management and even pest management. Then there is a part of permaculture, which is, I discussed social permaculture and autonomy, where we talk about communities, how to build communities, how to have alternate economies. People want to have a new source of income, alternate economies, livelihoods, governance, and even apply permaculture to the urban area. So this is urban permaculture. So these are the topics in permaculture. And I will just say, this is the foundation course, about 20 hours. And then there is a permaculture design certificate course, which is a minimum of 72 hours and which is agreed upon globally. 72 hours is actually, it can, all PDCs throughout the world follow the same format, and it is based on a permaculture design manual. So the teachers can add the little flavor here and there, but basically the whole curriculum is fixed. So this is a 72-hour PDC, and this can be online PDC, which is spread over several months, and it is study as you go. It's flexible to you how you would study when you finish it. And this is offered by many permaculture institutes. And then also there are on-site courses, which can be 12 to 15 day long full-time courses. So this on-site has its own flavor because people are coming together, connecting with each other, mostly people from a particular climate. So you study more about that particular climatic zone. So each of these have their own flavors. So that is how permaculture education is shared. There can be an introduction course, foundation course, and finally there can be a PDC certification course. So I will end my presentation now. And
yes,
I will ask Pratik Kapur to take on. So he wants to make some announcement. And after that, we'll have question answer session. If there are any question answers, you can put it in the chat box or you can directly ask. So up to you, Pratik.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Pushpa ji, for this very informative and systematic presentation introducing us the education of permaculture. And we also thank all the participants for being with us throughout this session. And as the Pushpa ji was mentioning, that we are going to have the Govardhan Eco Village is now offering the 20-hour foundation course. We're very happy to announce that we are going to start this 20-hour foundation course beginning on 9th April, and it is spread over 8 Sundays. So we're going to share the details of this course in the WhatsApp group of the Permaculture. All of you are part of the WhatsApp group. If you have not, and I will share the link of the WhatsApp group in the Zoom chat right now. So please do join, make sure you're part of this group where we will be sharing all the details and other formalities to be completed before this joining this course. Please note, it's a very interactive course and it's a 20-hour course. It's a certificate course and there are only 20 seats, right? We can only take 20 in a batch. So I request all those who are interested to sign up for this course and take advantage of this beautiful education and apply it in one's own life. So any other questions about the course?
Or any question you have regarding the presentation and the course, you can ask here. And we have
You
limited
also
only.
the WhatsApp group.
Yeah. So we have
Yeah,
limited
20,
the
yes.
access to only 20 people in
So
the
we
course.
will also open up the WhatsApp group. Yes, yes. First, if there are any questions in regards to today's session, and also if somebody wants to ask anything about the course, you can ask the teacher, Pushpaji. You can raise your hands and you can ask, or you can just unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, I'll just read some of the comments and questions from the chat box. So Shilpa is writing, so it's more or less like sustainability, developing sustainable city kind of. Yeah. So this is part of the sustainable city is part of permaculture, like I discussed during the presentation. It can be applied the knowledge of permaculture to diverse applications, and obviously we can even design a sustainable city. Can we get the recording? Many people have asked, so I leave it to Pratik to do this. I don't know what he has decided. It's up to him. Hare Krishna, any subsidy for permaculture in Maharashtra state? So this is Sudhanshu speaking. I didn't understand the question. Subsidy for permaculture in Maharashtra state.
Does government provide?
Government provide any? See, actually, permaculture is actually in a very nascent form right now in India, and government doesn't give subsidy for any type of farming as of now. Our government is giving subsidies for. See, there are various policies. You know that Kusum. There is a this thing subsidy for getting solar panel. You know, solar panel on your farm, or it will give you subsidy for getting drip irrigation. So like farmers who are doing actual work on the land, there are subsidies for various products, but there is no subsidy as such for anything organic farming or natural farming or zero budget farming or permaculture. So it's when you do this farming, you get subsidies from the government when you start applying for some products, you know, for various things. So the government does have a lot of subsidies which you have to use for particular buying some things. What is the
Dear
cost?
participants, you can just note that I've shared 2 links in the Zoom chat. So one link is for the WhatsApp group. Just in case you're not part of the WhatsApp group, please do join the group. And yes, I've also shared the recording, the YouTube recording of today's session. You're free to share the recordings of this session with your friends and colleagues. And also in the same YouTube link, we will also description, we will have the course details. So I request to just save this YouTube recording link and also the WhatsApp group link. Yes, you can continue, Mataji.
All the other details will be put in the WhatsApp link, which Pratik talked about. Course fees and all will be there. So you can look through that. Yeah. So that is all the questions which are there on the chat box. But if somebody wants to ask a direct question regarding the session, they can ask here.
You can, anybody can just unmute and ask. Anybody would like to ask? This is last call for asking for
Unmute and
questions.
ask. Unmute and ask.
Okay. I guess there are no questions. So we would like to thank all of you for joining us and staying with us right through the end. And once again, like to thank Pushpa ji for this wonderful systematic presentation on permaculture. Hope to see all of you for the Permaculture Foundation course. And please do spread the message about this course with others.
I just
Thank you
wanted to
very much.
add here 1 minute
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
this today, because it was a small session, limited, so it was just a one-way kind of presentation. But this 21-hour course which we are going to do, it's going to be very interactive. It's online, but it's very interactive. It will be very participatory. And like I said in the presentation, all walks of life, people from all walks of life can join. And actually, the more the merrier, and the more diverse background, the more information sharing happens. So it's going to be a very interactive. That's why we are limited the seats to 20, because we can manage very nicely within a small group. You know, when the group becomes very large, then interaction suffers. So thank you very much.
See, Madam, I want to speak. Hare
Yeah.
Krishna, Hare Krishna. See, I have shared yesterday that this link had been put in the Bhagavad Gita group, Bhagavad Puran group. This link had been put. So I have shared to my contacts, means some of my contacts.
Thank
Then
you very
sudden
much.
that sudden time had come 1:30. It
Okay,
would
okay.
start at the meeting. It will start at 1:30. So I
Okay.
joined, and till the meeting was in the process.
Okay.
So I don't know for how many I have shared. I don't know.
Thank you so much.
For many I have shared that which I
You
had
can
put in
share
the
this recording with your friends and all.
recording will be done.
Yeah.
Okay. Then after the meeting also can be shared.
Yeah. Yes, you can.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We stop the recording and the I'm leaving the meeting, Prabhuji.
Yes.